On the topic of disrespecting black men, Jordan Davis will be next on the list. So, as you all already know, Michael Dunn, Jordan Davis's murderer, was convicted of 3 counts of attempted murder, but in the murder of Jordan Davis, the jury could not come to a conclusion. And the jury was able to decide that the three were able to convict Michael Dunn of the 3 counts of attempted murder because as the other boys in the car were driving away, Michael Dunn chased after the car and continued to shoot at them. So the jury saw this as okay, the danger is going away, like the danger is leaving, but yet you continue to persist after the other boys, even as they're driving away. So that's how they're able to convict him of 3 counts of attempted murder, but in the murder of Jordan Davis, they were unable to agree. And so since then, since the verdict has come out, 2 jurors have come out to discuss their thoughts or the jury's process in making those deliberations. So let's listen to the first person.
For a lot of folk in America, they would say, white man shoots and kills a 17-year-old black boy. How could it not be about race on some level?
Sitting in that room, it was never presented that way. We looked at it as a bad situation where teenagers were together and words were spoken and lines were crossed.
The jury was made up of 8 whites, 2 blacks, a Hispanic.
Now, this jury says that it was not presented to them that way, that Michael Dunn was white and Jordan Davis was black. It wasn't presented that way. So my first initial response is, where does this woman live? When in America do we have to say, okay, this is a white man, this is a black man, this is a white woman, this is a black woman? There's never, when do we have to say that? Like, so that's why I wonder, where in America does she live where if race is not presented to her, she doesn't see it? Now, there's a difference between not seeing it and pretending not to see it. And so in this case, I think that, or at least my assumption was that she was pretending not to see it, and she didn't see it because it wasn't presented to her that way. So when I first heard her, in my mind, I just was like, okay, this is a white woman. She probably lives in some place where it's just all middle-class white folks, and she doesn't have to interact with any other type of minorities, and that's why she says that it wasn't presented to her in that way, and that's why it wasn't a discussion with her. And then I heard this.
Everybody's making this a white and black thing, and it's not. In our decision-making process, nobody brought up not one race. Never. It was never brought up.
If this case wasn't about race, then what was it about for you?
It was about justice.
If this case was not about race, what was it about for you? And she says justice. Okay, so when I heard the first lady, I was just, okay, maybe she was crazy. And then I heard the second lady, or the second woman, and she's black, and she happens to be the youngest one in the jury, and I'm just like, okay, what is this jury about? Like, where do they find these people? Like, in my mind, I completely agree with this woman. As with every case, it should be about justice. But in this particular case, and in a lot of other cases, justice would be to look at the racial components of the situation. Like, I don't understand how there can be such a black and white case and race was not looked at. And this is also the youngest person on the jury. So I just wonder what type of person she is. Does she think that she's living in post-racial America? Does she think that, because she got a fro or whatever, that she somehow, I don't know. I really don't understand it, but I don't understand how race is not brought up at all. Either the jurors didn't want to talk about it, or they honestly believed that race wasn't a part of the conversation. But in either of those cases, if she believed that it was about justice and race was not deliberated, no parts of race was discussed, um, then justice was not served. Jordan Davis did not get justice. And so, after hearing these two jurors, what then came to mind is, okay, so race was ignored, but race is, as I believe, was central, and most of America believes that race was central to the case. So basically, what happens is Michael Dunn racializes the situation. He hears these boys playing loud music. He asks them to turn them down. He asks the boys to turn it down. They don't listen. He racializes the situation, and he becomes frightened because, okay, black boys, loud music, black boys, young. He believes something is going down. So he racializes the situation, which invokes his fear. But his fear was not based on reality. His fear was based in racial stereotypes. So because he believed in racial stereotypes and he racialized the situation, he became fearful. That fear was not actual fear. It was based in his racial stereotypes, but he believed it to be real. And so, in doing so, in racializing the situation, he was scared, and that gave him the fuel he needed to use deadly force against these young boys and to kill Jordan Davis. And the law in Florida and other places with stand your ground states backed him up. So he was able to then come to the jury, and the jury was able to believe that he was fearful of his life, and therefore, because he was afraid, he was then able to use deadly force. But as I stated, that fear was rooted in racial stereotypes. So it was not actual fear. So if the jury did not talk about race, and as I just said, Michael Dunn racialized the situation, then all the facts in the case doesn't matter, because the jury must also then believe in the racialized fear that Michael Dunn expressed. Like, the jury must have believed in that so much so that they didn't even have to discuss, was his fear of black men a legit reason to use deadly force, even though there was no gun found. These were just regular black boys. They had loud music. So here we have a problem where this is what Michael Dunn believes the law allows him to shoot black men down because they have loud music and he's scared. And then you have a jury who also believes that that's okay. So not talking about race means that justice will never be done. Because if you don't understand the racial undertones, well, in this case, the racial overtones, there will be no justice. And so what essentially happens in Florida and with cases and other states with stand your ground states, they effectively make racial stereotypes legal. Like, that's what happens. Michael Dunn is fearful, not because these boys are threatening him or there's an immediate danger, but because they're black boys, they have loud music, they're young, so therefore he has to be scared. In addition to him being scared, they also did not turn down the music as he suggested or as he asked. So we have young black boys, loud music. I asked them to turn their music down. They didn't. So now we have disrespected white men and fear. And that disrespected white men plus fear equals black men dead. That's what happens. And the law says that that's okay. The law says, Michael Dunn, that is okay for you to be racist. And the jury says, Michael Dunn, that is okay for you to be racist and shoot these black boys up. And yet, the jury does not discuss race. Didn't come up. The one juror said it was not presented to her this way. And the black one says nobody ever talked about it. But yet, she claims that the case wasn't about race, it was about justice. Justice wasn't done. There was no justice for Jordan Davis. And the law makes sure that if you are fearful of blacks because of racial stereotypes, it is okay for you then to defend yourself with deadly force because you are afraid. Not because you are actually afraid, but because you are afraid of what the racial stereotype says. If Michael Dunn had played out if this had played out the same exact way, this Michael Dunn case, and these boys were whites, the jury would have found that Michael Dunn's reaction to white boys was over exaggerated, and they would have found him guilty on all counts. They would have said his use of deadly force on white men was egregious, it was an over exaggeration, and they would have found him guilty on all counts. But because the young boys were black, the jury was like, yep, black boys playing loud music, yeah, we'll be scared too. Shoot them dead. Kill them. But race was not discussed. Not at all. But yet, she says that it's not about race, it's about justice. Look at this face and ask me if justice was served.